Is your palette knife paintings aren't turning out the way you imagine? Is it too flat or messy, making you frustrated? Then you might be making one of these critical mistakes. In today's video, I will help you identify and fix these mistakes and help you to get bold, textured and professional looking results. Let's get started.
The first one is using too much of a paint. If you are using too much paint, of course for palette knives painting you have to use a lot of paint, but that does not mean you have to use too much of it. It can get very messy and also it can overwhelm your composition. So how to avoid that is that you have to start with small amounts and build up gradually from there. One thing that you can do is do not take your paint tubes and pour it on the canvas directly and then work with your palette knives. That way you can avoid using too much of a paint. Whatever your palette knife can take, that is the amount of paint you can work with at a given point of time. For example, in the sky, if I use too much of a paint, like if I use the cobalt blue, then the turquoise blue, everything together directly from the paint tubes, and if I try to mix them up here, then it would have been a great mess. What I am doing instead is taking little bit of these paints from the palette and then trying to mix it up on the canvas. So whatever you are taking on the palette knife, that is enough for one spread. The other thing you can do is allow the below layer to dry and then work on top of it as layers, but then directly do not put so much of paint on your canvas and then try to mix them up. It can get very messy.
If you are new to acrylics, here is my free guide on color mixing for beginners, which has all the basics and tips for color mixing. You can download it from the link guide.modulacreations.com. I will also leave a link in the description below.
The next one is scraping instead of spreading. So when you are just scraping the paint too much or giving too much of a pressure when you are scraping the paint, you can end up damaging your canvas. This also creates uneven textures, and also what happens is the below layer, even if it is dry, if you are using too much pressure, that also can come off. So what is the solution for this is you have to hold your knife at a slight angle and then apply even pressure throughout when you are scraping, and do not press it too much. The pressure has to be just enough to take off the paint off the canvas. I'm just using the palette knife in a slight angle and taking off some of the paint. So this creates a great texture to the top of the hut, but then if you are trying to put too much of a pressure, the underlying layer will also come off and it will not have a richer look. The next one is overblending colors. When you are overblending your colors, you will muddy your painting for sure. You have to mix the colors on the canvas, but that does not mean you have to mix them too much. So to avoid this, you have to load separate colors on different parts of your knife and keep the strokes intentional. So what do I mean by that? For example, here in this area, I wanted to do both the light and the darker shades. I will not pre-mix them on the palette, but rather I would pick up both the colors simultaneously on the back side of the knife and just go with my stroke intentionally of creating that highlight. The next one is ignoring drying times. Every layer you have to allow it to dry and then you have to work on top of it. So in case you are not doing that, the wet layers can smudge and ruin your details totally. Here, before adding the figures, I have allowed the below layer to completely dry. If at all I have worked when it is wet, then the top layer colors would definitely mix with the below layer colors and it make it too much smudged, and I won't get the rich vibrant color that I am looking for. So you have to always allow each layer to dry before adding more.
The next mistake is not using the right paint consistency. So if you are using bottle acrylic paints, sorry, it's not suitable for palette knife painting. The bottle paints are very watery and won't hold any texture. I did a comparison between your bottle and tube paints. I will link it in the card above and in the description box below. Do have a look at it. Similarly, if you are using your tube paints with water, it will be overly thinned out and won't be suitable for knife painting. So what's the solution for this? Only use thick tube paints for knife painting. For example, in this painting, I am using artist grade tube paints alone. This holds the peaks and the ridges very well. As a result, it gives a very good texture effect to your painting. You can also use heavy body acrylics for a better palette knife effect. If your paint is too thick and not spreading enough, you can add just a touch of water, or you could also mix it with a gel medium to work on the consistency. So ideally, the consistency of the paint is so very important to get a good texture results with your palette knife. Now let's see the next mistake. The next mistake is not cleaning the knife between strokes. You cannot keep working on the same palette knife without cleaning the knives properly. So the residual paint on the knife can muddy colors and affect textures on your painting. So to fix this, always wipe the knife clean when you are switching colors or when you are going to change to a different palette knife technique. Here I am going to change to a completely different set of colors. So I am cleaning my knife on an old cloth. You can wipe on an old cloth, tissue, etc. but keep your knives clean. The next mistake we are going to discuss is using the wrong type of palette knife. Not all palette knives are the same. A wide, flexible knife is great for smooth spreads, while a pointed, stiff knife works better for sharp textures. I have already shown you a variety of knives in the previous videos. I will link in the card above and also mention it in the description box below. But ideally, you have to own a range of knives. It need not be in hundreds but at least 2 or 3 knives to begin with. Here, for filling of the sky, I am using a triangular palette knife which has more base area and easy to fill. And for the edge work here, I am using a long palette knife. So you need to experiment with different knife shapes to see what works best for your style and find out your favorites. I would suggest you to have a triangular knife, a long knife for edge work and a small knife to start with. Alternatively, you can also get the mixed pack of knives which has all the starter palette knives. This is very good for beginners. I will leave a link to it below, check it out. Coming to the next mistake, it is about overworking on the painting. When you have normally worked with brush for long enough and trying out palette knife, it can get tricky. This is because we are used to smooth blend many of the areas of the painting, be it a landscape or a portrait. But palette knife paintings are bold and textured. It has to be presented in that way for a richer look. So going over areas too much can remove texture and make muddy colors. So the solution to this is to lay down the paint with confidence and resist the urge to keep adjusting, keep smooth blending over and over again. Allow the colors to be just placed next to each other. Do not overmix or blend them. Also, do not scrape off too much paint from the canvas. I have seen students who use palette knife as a brush where they take all of the ridges and textures off. These paintings are still good, no doubt about it, but these paintings will lack the heaviness of the paint and the texture that it brings to make it look more 3D. So do not remove the textures created with a knife. It should be a part of your painting. In continuation to this, the next mistake we are going to talk about is not using enough paint in some areas. We have already seen that using too much paint is a mistake and can make your paintings messy, while using too little paint can also be a problem. Thin applications with a palette knife may look very patchy and uneven. It will also bring the end effect of your painting like a brush and not as a knife. So the solution to this is load your knife with enough paint to create that bold textured strokes. And finally, another important mistake is forgetting to experiment with different textures. Many beginners stick to only one type of strokes, missing out on all the full range of effects a palette knife can create. I have done a video on explaining the palette knife techniques earlier. If you had missed to watch it out, I'll leave a link below and in the card above too. These techniques include dabbing, blending, edge work with your palette knife, and there are much more that you can do with your knives. Different techniques with different knives create different textures. So study different techniques and implement it on various areas of your paintings and make your artwork stand out.
So as an overall tip, I would say small amounts and intentional strokes with little bit of patience will make you a master in your palette knives.
If you want to know more about palette knives, check out this ultimate guide video, and if you are interested to see a full palette knife painting in action, watch this video here. If you got value from this video, do like, share and subscribe. See you in another similar video.